Graceful greetings to all, and the warmest of delighted welcomes. Thank you for taking some of your time to watch my video. I beseech you to please stay with me till the end of this video. In this video today, I bring forth my views on some of the most common asked questions about President Donald Trump. Such as question 1, is Donald Trump a dictator? Question 2, what are my current views concerning the recent passed legislations or suggested projects of the 2025 Donald Trump administrations? Let's find out. Well, my answer to question 1 is no. I do not believe that President Donald Trump is a dictator, and here's why. A dictator is a person that forces other people to do what they want them to do, whether it's what they believe is right, or in other cases it is not even something that they believe is right, but it's just something that they want to impose on other people. A dictator is a person that misuses power in order to control others. Meaning in leadership, a dictator would be a very cruel, subjective, autocratic leader that uses the power of the law in order to enforce their opinion on others, or in order to just play around, starting wars, causing violence, or challenging how great of a villain they could be. Well, that is what many people claim Donald Trump is. But here's the reasons why I say, no, he's not. Reason number 1. This is a reason of which I have sort of declared before in some documents that I released in year 2022, as in early, maybe March 2022. A reason that is very important to me with the kind of context that I am usually focused on, or what I say that is very important to my dreams. This reason is President Donald Trump is a person that has participated in a lot of projects that had to do with protecting minorities, some of the minorities that were getting hurt or treated unfairly across the world, not only in the United States. And he took these actions of participating in these projects long before a couple of other people, as in a couple of other leaders, began to recognize those projects as important as they are, or as we find them to be in the modern day. Speaking of projects such as, well, number 1, I'll begin with one that is, as I said, most important to me, which was when President Donald Trump took the stand to do what many call befriending Michael Jackson, which in truth was both friendship, familyship, and most of all, speaking legally or influentially, endorsement. This was a very important step in the 1980s, because that was at the time when Michael Jackson was a subject of controversy. This was when Michael Jackson was a discussion of being a distraction by being an expression of sexual ambiguity an expression of androgyny, when many people were criticizing the Reagan White House for inducting Michael Jackson simply because Michael Jackson was a person with atypical sex characteristics, which usually goes unmentioned. However, it was at the very time when that was not the only base, but Michael Jackson was also often accused of being a criminal, a child molester. And, well, if I can say, a very perplexing creature in some way, or an evil person in the sum of these accusations. Oh yes, and alongside that, of course, Michael Jackson was also accused of being a racist. Not to forget that. Now, a fact that I've mentioned and discussed before, or recently brought up, or re-exposed, that Michael Jackson was, well, attacked on the basis of the usually unmentioned fact that he was an intersex person. Now, intersex activism is something that is only beginning to surface for many in these days as we currently speak. And we are speaking of the 1980s, before ISNA was built, before Sollygrass had passed any legal appeal in the Congress concerning intersex security laws. In those days, Donald Trump had the courage to come and endorse Michael Jackson and defend him in a very sincere manner. Did Donald Trump get criticized for this? Very much. Very, very much. In fact, this is where most of the negative opinions about him began. This is where most of people's dislike for him began. Most of people's need to call him a racist as well, to call him a criminal as well, and well, in the future, to call him a woman sexual abuser. Wow, how far does these things go sometimes? But what did he do with this? Did he say the fact that other people are not up to intersex activism yet, what I'm going to do is, because I feel that it is okay for me to befriend Michael Jackson, and I feel that I respect the Reagan White House, I'm going to force everybody to do this. And I'm going to make sure that in my business real estate apartments, anybody that disagrees with me about Michael Jackson is going to get kicked out. I don't care what is the amount you paid, how much you protected the building, what your personal rights are as a human being to have your opinion, and the very fact that the law does not even agree with me on befriending Michael Jackson, the fact that the law does not agree with me in endorsing an intersex person. Is that what Donald Trump did? No. Now somebody can say, well, that's because he was doing a good thing. If somebody, well, I'm speaking of most likely a logic person that is coming from the fact that it is the right thing for everybody to have freedom. So yes, of course, that kind of person would say this is because Donald Trump was endorsing a good fact. But well, that does not qualify. A dictator is a dictator, whether they're doing it for a good reason or a bad reason. Because that's where it all begins. Is that what he did? No, he did not. The fact that he carried his opinion diplomatically does not mean it was not an opinion, and it was not an opinion that is separate from the majority's opinion, and it does not mean he did not keep it to himself. And alongside that, he did not betray the opinion either, because, well, to me, sometimes I sometimes find that to also be some kind of dictatorship, to say, well, if everybody else does not stand with this, even if it's right, I'm going to betray it. In some way, you are forcing everybody to act according to the way you feel as soon as you feel it. And as soon as you are put in a position where you recognize something rushes and it has to be in your hands to teach it unto your fellow beings, you release it immediately. Yes, I get it. That kind of person as well doing, double dictatorship, or would you say 50-50 dictatorship with 50%? You're dictating the Russia's act, and you're being impatient to wait for others, or to teach it unto others, or to endure what it needs for you to present this up until other people learn it from you. Whereas, of course, the other 50% is where you're dictating yourself, which is indeed dictating a human being, a factor of a statistic, of presentation, of existence, of facts, meaning when you minus yourself from participating in that act that would bring a good result, you are self-dictating and inflicting on a world that remains with the lack of that Russia's act. Fact number 2 of reason 1, or minority group number 2, is women. Well, Donald Trump always expressed support for women in power, women in business, women in politics. Even in the early 90s, or was it the late 90s, at a certain point when he was asked who would he pick for vice president if he was to run for president. And he said he would pick Oprah. Yes, it was back in the days before Oprah began to clash with him. Well, Oprah is, of course, a black woman. What most people these days claim that Donald Trump does not like, when many call him a racist and a woman hater or a woman abuser. But he endorsed this, and even here, with a very formal presentation, he didn't look sarcastic. He did seem to be maybe amused by the fact that it was a fresh new idea and he knows other people find it to be awkward. So of course he was feeling enthusiastic, imagining what it could be, looking at the benefits of where it could lead us, the kind of perspective it would influence. But the fact is, in that amusement, he endorsed the fact, and he actually carried this around his friends and family, the way in which he educates his daughters, the way in which he communicates or associates with other women in power, the way in which he respects them. Well, this was back in those days, before many people had begun to shout out for women in power. Here again, it added the whole idea of Donald Trump like swinging out to these minority opinions, or to these strange opinions as some would call. What did he say? Did he say, hey guys, if I believe I am okay to share leadership with a woman, share standards with a woman, or have peaceful competition with a woman, and you guys don't understand that this is normal and we are just human beings, I'm going to make sure that I cut you out my businesses. I do not associate with you Oh, I hire an assassin for you? No, that at least not what I know of, or what I haven't seen any evidence of, or any implications of. Again, this does not mean because he didn't do it, or because it was for the right reason, it wasn't an opinion. And it does not mean he did not keep it to himself. Fact 3 of reason 1. Well, as another which I've mentioned before, he was a high supporter of President Ronald Reagan, and President Ronald Reagan, working alongside his deputy president in those days, President George H.W. Bush, they were working on a legislation that was not a very favorable kind in those days of protecting the human rights of Americans with disabilities. Yes, working towards the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, in those days, he went on to support. And I'm not saying, well, somebody cannot support a president that they have certain disagreements with. But, well, he didn't only support in that way, he directly engaged in some participations. As in, for instance, he spoke well and endorsed the philanthropic works of friends of his, such as his very intersex activist friend Michael Jackson, the founder of Neverland, where most of the projects that were regarding sick children, children with disabilities, were being endorsed, connected to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and other of such foundations, other of such projects. Donald Trump would hang out around those kind of places, give support the ideas, speak out for them. He was there. It's the truth. That's how I know it was not just a support for Reagan exclusive to this fact. So, here again, it was not in the view of many people. It was not something that people established, worshipped, viewed as a inspiring act. It was something people criticized once again. But again here, did Donald Trump say the fact that they don't like this other opinion of mine again, maybe this time I should blow them up? No, he did not. This again does not mean it was not an opinion. This does not mean it was not something which he has to take action or put himself aside diplomatically, peacefully, knowing that when you take any act of supporting or standing for any kind of idea in, well, civil rights context, you are most likely in the danger of being hurt by anybody that disagrees with you. That fact was there. But yes, once again, he kept the opinion to himself. I have not seen such a dictator. Fact 4 of reason 1. Well, another which I've mentioned. When the young scholar Ryan White was publicly abused, stigmatized, scrutinized, and isolated after contracting with the deadly STD, HIV/AIDS, from a blood transfusion due to the fact that he was born as a hemophilic. This child began to speak out as a national spokesman for HIV/AIDS, and He did not speak out for it, saying, well, for people like him that happen to get it by blood transfusions or other mistakes and not by, well, misbehaved, unprotected sex kind of behavior or misbehaved conduct of sexual behavior. No, he did not. He said he was standing for himself in the sense of every human being that happens to have the virus. When it's in the body, it's a human being. They have a disease. They need protection against this disease and the right to decide what they do with themselves. Whether it's an endangered person, they got it based on their actions and they are willing to change, or it's an endangered person that got it based on a matter that inflicted on them without them having any input in that result. Here again, Donald Trump was amongst the few influential people that came to say, hey people, we can hang around people with AIDS. We are not going to automatically get infected. This is how the disease is handled. They have feelings. They're human beings. It's okay for us to care for them, protect them, just like we protect people with other diseases of which we have learned about and accepted. Yes, I don't mean he said it in these words. He said it in his words and his own actions. But here again was it. He did not say, I finally give up. Human beings are stupid. You know what? It's better we just force them to do this thing altogether. Or it's better we pause all activities going on in the country right now. You know what, President Reagan, how about we just held up everything until everybody agreed that this was the action we have to take today. And if it needs 1 hour later or tomorrow, it's not going to happen. No, that's not what he said. He again portrayed his opinion through actions and carried it diplomatically. This does not mean it was not an opinion. It does not mean it was not a point of view. It does not mean it's not the way he saw like things should be. But however, he kept it to himself. He applied it on himself. Fact 5 of reason 1. During the 80s, yes, it was a couple of years past segregation, but there were still more programs that were being done concerning the civil rights of black people, or what I say, people of color. Again there, Donald Trump did take action. And well, maybe not running around presenting what people would call black fashion in order to give that influence necessarily, or just sticking around a number of black people. Maybe, well, you might not like them, no, but by the very reason of criticizing some people that oppose people that are endorsing projects to help advance the civil rights or help grow the programs that were meant to set aside the damages of the civil rights, i.e., we return back to his, well, humanitarian friend, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson had songs such as Man in the Mirror, appealing for recognition of countries in different places that were still struggling with matters of racial segregation. Amongst them was the popular history of how South Africa was then still under the apartheid laws. Man in the Mirror shown pictures of Sir Desmond Tutu, shown pictures of Sir Martin Luther King, called for the idea of the peace between the United States and Russia, called for support towards ending poverty amongst different communities. Well, President Donald Trump, of course, I'm not going to put the fact that he just supported the music, no. But when people such as Michael Jackson and other Republican members that participated in the projects that were going on regarding these matters, yes, most people don't often mention, but Donald Trump did give a hand. He did come out. He did make a word, and recognizing that some of those kind of ideas were seen by many to be, well, new or modern incorrect stuff in some way, or far dreams to reach, even to the many who believed in these ideas, because there were a couple of those who believed in these ideas. They were not, well, as strange to people as the ideas I previously listed. However, President Trump, yes, in those days, gave support by endorsing the people that present these ideas, coming forth, having the courage to stand up and say, this is a good work. This is what we are supposed to do. This is the kind of America we're supposed to have. I was very glad to see that this project took place and it gained this amount of great results. He was there to also donate to these programs. Most people often don't mention the kind of charity that President Trump offered. Yes, at times it was money, but at times he did not always release certain amounts directly, but, well, it always takes money in order to organize whether transport, a location for presentation, material needed, facilities as in study sources to present a project, and as well, the most important donation is to donate oneself in a dangerous position to stand and say, I agree with this fact, even if I can get murdered for it. That is one of the most important factors of charitability that I admire from President Donald Trump. Now, reason number 2. Somebody that carries all these ideas in a diplomatic fashion is a person that, well, I could call a diplomat. Now, being a diplomat itself is just a fact of clarity to that. One can hardly be, well, a diplomatic dictator. And, well, if somebody used to say, what if somebody was a diplomat, that forces everybody else to be a diplomat? But, well, that sounds like an impossibility. Because now how are they diplomatic if they force other people to be diplomatic with them? See, that just does not have sense. Reason number 3. Yes, one could say I'm repeating a reason, but these arguments took years. We saw President Trump over years and years under this criticism of strange opinions. And while here and there he'll find different kind of strategies to kind of send out his point of view, but all in all, I can say he has hardly came forth and say, you know what, forget about all those stuff now, we done. It actually counts how long one can go, because somebody could dare to say I'm doing this for now, and as soon as a few years go by, they quit. But well, the arguments to that could be what leads to question 2 of what are my current views about what Donald Trump is currently doing right now. One could say some of the laws that he is passing or announcing to pass are him quitting on the good acts or good concepts that he endorsed and carried out in the past. Well, one of the currently trending subjects here where I am living in South Africa is that President Donald Trump offered a refugee program in order to rescue, would I say, the minority South Africans that are being mistreated on the basis of race, religion, or political beliefs. And this program was introduced as in a refugee program to protect the Afrikaner people. Now, there is this trending story about the offer of President Trump to take in the Afrikaner people, white, colored, and Indian, that are being mistreated in South Africa. And alongside that, there is what many people explain as Donald Trump cutting ties with South Africa on some funding aid. But well, in order to explain that second part, well, I've watched a couple of YouTube videos, and what I realized was that most people explain this as cutting ties, but well, in legal processes, as far as I know, cutting ties can be done in different ways. There is to pull out from working with a certain nation or a certain land because you're choosing to opt out, as in you pull out even if you know your reason may be what you feel is right, but you just decide to sign out, as in legally, like the fact you put on the paper is that you're signing out. Now, that doesn't seem to be what President Trump did. He seems to have addressed this as some form of sanctions that are being applied on South Africa. Yes, now most South Africans might not explain this way to you because, well, it stigmatizes the fact that once upon a time sanctions were given to the National Party in order to stop discriminating against black people, and now when the black government is in power, the sanctions are being put on the ANC. Well, so many people wouldn't want to explain this in a fair way. They would want to explain it as if it's an opinion, where since he feels this way, he thinks he's going to do this, and he just cut out. Well, he cut out with an explanation by using the format of sanctioning South Africa. This kind of indicates a person that is not giving up, but, well, in my view, a person that is looking for peace, a person that is looking for the South African government to come forth and make peace and resolve the issue, just as he supported the previous sanctions during President Ronald Reagan's term that were sanctioned on the very South Africa in order to free the black South Africans. So, in that case, if you are to consider these sanctions bad, in my opinion, it means the sanctions that were put in the past were also bad, right? Because now some form of legal threat or some form of legal punishment that is not directly murdering somebody is regarded to be taken when it is an obvious abusive act that is continuously being taken by a government in power, more especially a government that is well aware of what they are doing and does not seem to represent a manner that is willing to stop, to quit on those actions. Now, okay. Regarding that, my opinion is, well, am I saying I have no problem with that law? Well, I don't know. But I can say, I do though witness that the minority nations in South Africa are not being treated fairly. I myself am a young white South African. And well, what do I think about that opportunity? Funny enough, what's my opinion? I can say my very self, yes. I would not like to be one to speak up for such. I'm not a fan of speaking for oneself, really. But it is important to state that according to self-experience or self-evidence, the unfair treatment towards the white citizens in South Africa is a truth. It is not a myth. I have experienced it in opportunities that I could have got in my dream that I've introduced in my previous videos. Well, if you don't know, I am a political activist that is based on protecting the human rights of intersex people. Now, this is a very difficult study because coming up, I had to learn about intersex conditions. I had to search about a context that is not often discussed. And I have to try to find a way to organize schedules and plans for how I'm going to deal with such and organize supporters. Now, when you deal with these kind of jobs, it means you have to do research, meaning most likely you don't only study in your classroom. You try to make friends with teachers, you try to make friends with your students at school, you try to make friends with your neighborhood libraries. And well, as a South African, I try to engage with this with people of different races. And guess what? What did I get? Ouch. What slowed me down so long? Another matter to discuss in another video. Well, however, my opinion on how Sir Donald Trump is dealing with that matter in offering the refugee program. Well, for me personally, I don't know, but I think my opinion about it is, thank you, President Donald Trump. There is a huge chance that I could take the program because, well, before the program came about, I already had a dream to work with the American government in order to free intersex people on planet Earth because of the very experience that I had which made me search further on the governing differences between South Africa's governing system and the United States' governing system. If you check some of my documentations, my videos, you'll realize that yes, I've published a couple of documentations concerning intersex issues. I'm on a project of publishing the truth about the history of Michael Jackson. I am on a mission to let the world know that Michael Jackson was an intersex person, that I believe Michael Jackson was a saint, a person given to all of us through the Creator for us to see a saint with intersex characteristics, sharing love, upholding peace, being an expression of justice, and most of all, presenting endless trust in the nature of the kind hearts of mankind. Now, I always had a dream to work with some of the people that worked with Michael Jackson, and President Donald Trump is one of them. I don't know if I'm going to be successful in this opportunity directly of him calling out for the refugee program. I don't know if I were to attempt to appeal, if I was going to make it there. However, I do have a message on this one. And my message is, I believe that I am encouraging the best action for everybody. As you can hear, I do not hide it. I do believe President Trump is looking for the South African government to apologize, and I do believe it would be a great, great achievement if they apologized and actually changed those actions and actually began to reconcile in this matter. However, this does not mean when you're apologizing, all of a sudden it's evidence that you are going to change after so many people have been hurt. Nor does it mean you've already went and removed all those laws that are biased or prejudiced. So, however, while I do believe that would be a good thing, but as the situation currently stands, I have a dream and I need to accomplish it. And I have always had the dream to work with the American government, even more in specific to work with President Donald Trump. So for me, I believe if I can take this opportunity and if I can succeed in this opportunity, well, personally for me, it could enhance my dream because, well, even if things were to improve in South Africa, let's say the South African government stopped, but it would be hard for me to achieve the kind of thing that I'm doing in South Africa. It would be hard for me to, achieve freeing intersex people in South Africa, because if you actually Google intersex rights in the world, like on official documents such as intersex rights Wikipedia, you'll realize that on the section of South Africa, they are rated as a country that have solved the matter of a lack of production or a lack of productive legal protection for intersex people. They are regarded as people that, well, granted intersex people the right to bodily integrity, the right to legal protection against discrimination on the ground of their intersex traits, the right to identify as intersex. Well, all in all, that is just a myth. That is what's rated there. And they're using this simply because they included intersex as a sex in their definition, and they're just counting on the fact that when they say when they have laws that say do not discriminate based on sex, race, and age, then it's supposed to imply that they've helped intersex people. That's not how you help a minority that has been set aside for so long. That's not how you well assist a minority of people that are born with conditions that are, well, much sensitive and fragile than other people. There are so many things that directly inflict on intersex people that have been hosted as fair programs in South Africa. And I am not seeing, that concrete barrier of cautious, kind legislation that directly cancels out all these harmful programs. How the actual safe legal process works, as in what they feel is right to do for maybe black people, I can say, where you find they have these many funds that they give in order to replace what they claim are the damages of apartheid, the advantages they grant, and well, even if they were to minus these endless funds, but laws that maybe explain or cancel out certain racial insults, and laws that educate or directly define the kind of acts that are discriminating against black people. Law works by act and act and act in action, if you understand. Now, there's nothing like that going on for intersex people, and I have not seen the South African government step up even once to protect intersex people. However, with the propaganda that claims they've solved the issue, meaning most likely they're going to sit down and pull that other South Africa propaganda on this and let it go as if something's solved. Go on to pretend cases for people such as Caster Semenya based on race, while the very EFF leader, Julius Malema, once popped out publicly and claimed, in opinion towards Caster's case, there is no such as intersex. Well, one might say, even President Donald Trump passed a law that says America will recognize only two sexes. So how do I believe I'm going to accomplish my dream in the United States? Isn't he betraying what he's done in the past? Well, my answer is, I cannot say that, because this is a complicated situation. Well, first off, most people, when speaking about gender spectrum, they often focused on the LGBT community and not the intersex community. And while intersex activists have tried to group themselves with the LGBT community in order to become a larger group and try to gain support, however, people have shown direct interest in proving that we as human beings, most of us prefer the LGBT community because, well, they are normal and this is something that they decided to be. It is not a sexual difference. It is not a scientific difference. It is nothing biological. While some doctors come forward and bring up these jokes of like it being something psychological and whatsoever. However, even if that joke was to be proven true one day, however, it is something that is discreet, something that can be well led without or left away. It is not something physical. It is not something substantial. However, most people spread education to endorse these kind of facts. And then even worse, when it comes to funding these groups that are supposed to be titled the LGBTI groups, funds that come in there are often used just for the LGBT community, and the I remains on the side. Now this means, yes, this is causing corruption. And alongside that, not only there does this corruption end, not only are we now just endorsing education about gays, but there is a difference from when you do something concerning yourself and when you do something concerning spreading hate, or criticizing or discriminating or ridiculing another person's condition. Now the LGBT community present themselves, well, in many cases as people that are ridiculing intersex people or shadowing the needs of intersex people. Now you find schools teaching about the LGBT, while the schools are not really even increasing education about intersex people. But okay, yes, this now just spreads corruption. Now, I'm not saying that maybe the LGBT community are people that I'm saying should be murdered or should be bullied, but they should carry it, well, diplomatically or very, very cautiously, in awareness that those are acts the heavens watching. It's not how they created. One day, any of them as individuals may want to quit and may not like what they've spread across towards other people. And even if they do not want to quit, but how they carry something that they know is shadowing the needs of others actually defines you as a villain in some way. And not only does it do so, but when other people understand what you're doing, and for those who directly make jokes or statements that sort of explain what they're doing, you are now encouraging discrimination. Now, not only does this end here, but even directly on legal protection of human rights of the gender spectrum group, the LGBT community had success in legal protection of their human rights, but intersex people were left behind. So can I say the whole gender spectrum group title directly rescues intersex people? Not really. It opens a door for them to have their activism public, but I cannot say that was necessarily dealt with or handled in only a positive way. Now, as well to that, it is not that before President Trump the United States was recognizing more than two sexes. It is important to clarify that there's a difference between sex and gender, as many might know. The United States of America had only two sexes, but however, under the sex classification, there was an X for a separate gender classification, which relates to the sex you are choosing to present, not necessarily your biological sex. And that was, well, where the LGBT were offered a option to categorize themselves according to their choice of sexual identification. And that is where intersex people were as well included. However, this was very unfair, I have mentioned in the past, because intersex is not a gender, but a sex. It's biological, as I say. It's not a choice. It's not a matter of the sex you would want to classify. It's a matter of how you were born, who you are. So does this mean President Trump is actually beginning to make the US have only two sexes that do not recognize intersex people? No. This is the law he already found. he moved the X for the gender identification there, if that's how the idea will go, or has went. However, I cannot say he directly came and attacked, well, a third sex classification, if that has sense in any way. Well, the reason I just explained, I'm not saying that that's his view of the reason why he would ban the very gender itself, but I'm just putting a point on what makes this complicated. Well, admitting in that point that I did depend heavily on some of the education sources that the United States government provides online to support medical studies that has to do with the sex spectrum of mankind. Because, studying to protect intersex people, I had to study about intersex conditions. And in the years of me doing this, living in South Africa, I relied a lot on those government sources. In specific, the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and CBI, the National Health Services, NHS. However, I cannot lie and say the fact that I was using that information in order to understand intersex people and defend their human rights, then well, that means that is how everybody else was using it. No, most people that go and study sexology, that study the human sex biologically, are people that want to go to be doctors that are going to enforce medical interventions on intersex people, that are going to use intersex people as well experiment tools in order to go on just experimenting on, well, sex changes and going on to support these ridiculous ideas such as transgenders. Now, not only does that end there, but the more intersex people are appealing publicly, many people that do not actually manage to carry themselves diplomatically when they disagree with something often go to use the very sources that I need that were created in order to serve educational purposes, to go find out about intersex conditions and come back to insult intersex people and come back to drain their intelligence by making fun of intersex people, which this makes for, well, a matter of what has brought down a huge section of American television, where you realize that, for instance, there are many movies that were based on Michael Jackson castrato jokes, Michael Jackson androgyny jokes, Michael Jackson child molester jokes, Michael Jackson transgender jokes. And now, you see, you get a lot of this, and you get a lot of basically uselessness that people make out of these important education sources. Again, here, this is not to say this is the reason why, but I'm just putting a view again. As I say, it's complicated. Next, this pressure concerning taking a stand for opinions or actions or concepts that people do not support. And what I mean by pressure, I mean their threats, their incriminations, and their hurtful experiences or very damaging circumstances that often end up tied to somebody in such a situation. Well, this is something people often understand when we look at people standing for other kind of situations, or people protecting other kinds of groups of isolated human beings. But, well, those understandings that we often give to, this is why Malcolm X had to strike and burn that, this is why who had to do that, Well, I'm not saying necessarily that any of this is the reason why Donald Trump is recognizing two sexes. But what I'm saying is, so far when I watched his address on recognizing two sexes, he said a lot concerning the LGBT community. But I have not directly found him stating matters that are insulting or attacking intersex people. So while this kind of law can inflict on them negatively, however, I cannot stand and say, I think he is doing this because he's directly attacking them. And I cannot stand and say, given I'm trying to support the human rights of intersex people, I understand all complicated circumstances that could come out in his position with what he's dealt with and his role in the subject when he has to run for president. I'm not one to say I'm worth to explain that. And even if I were to be wrong and he's well angry and just giving up on that, however, here comes my opinion. Well, in order for great outcomes of peace to succeed in the legal system, it is important that these dreams be met with by the correct kind of leaders, by diplomatic people, people that are willing to negotiate and respect each other's disagreements, people that are willing to come together, put their facts and reasons, and find a solution peacefully. It is important for any kind of justice plan to be dealt with by one who is willing to be objective, one who is willing to vow to collaborate with others and hear the reasons for other people's disagreements to what they're appealing for, even if they know what they're appealing for is right. Therefore, me knowing that President Donald Trump has been a diplomat for all these years and even now is granting a very reasonable act of sanctions against South Africa and the very act of the refugee program regarding the South African Afrikaners. The act that most people find to be subjective given the fact that Donald Trump is white, so they portray it as if he cares for white people. However, I have already mentioned how many times have he engaged himself to stand for people that were in trouble of discrimination or unfair treatment on the basis of circumstances of which he does not share with them. Now, me knowing that President Donald Trump is the very person that was a huge factor or collaborator in creating this inspiring history of the intersex activist Michael Jackson, of which I have come to dedicate myself to establish, endorse, present, and defend. Most of all, a person which I have accepted to bow unto as a gift from God, a saint of which I have with my whole heart vowed to be a disciple unto. I will say, President Donald Trump is a being that stood alongside Saint Michael Jackson. I do believe that that president, with all the good contributions, with all the peaceful acts that he has given, and most importantly to me, the contributions to intersex activism, but as well as his contributions to other matters of freedom, I vow that I promise to negotiate all my opinions in complete diplomacy. I promise to negotiate all my opinions in complete objectivity. I promise to not be judgmental. I promise to not be impatient. I promise to not be selfish and not realize what kind of hand could President Trump be needing. I promise that I shall not stand and speak against a matter which has not evidentially proven itself to me. As far as I know, President Donald Trump is the man that has built the foundation for my current dream. So I vow to carry that dream of which I have always had to accomplish with him. And I send my invitation that President Donald Trump, thank you for the refugee program. And above that, thank you for the kind acts that you have dedicated to the world, even if they mostly go out unrecognized or criticized or propagated. But to me, I honestly do believe that you can be the Abraham Lincoln for intersex people. I vow to commit myself to accomplish this American dream come true. With you, from now till forever. I shall endure whatever it takes. I am dedicated. I am inspired. And whoever is willing to challenge that, I leave that to the hands of the kingdom of heaven. With that, I invite the rest of the world that maybe if we can give President Trump a chance, sit back for this moment, actually ask him about what are the most sensitive issues that are very much a problem that trouble or drag his attention towards being bothered with the current crime status in America. What are the most damaged facts or damaged standards in the peaceful land that are making him feel to pass strict constitutions? I do believe that every leader that has stood and presented diplomatic acts, just acts, and presented them sincerely, with justice, peacefully, and most of all with gratitude, proudly, and took down all the consequences of being criticized and harmed for defending the fate of freedom, needs to be given a chance to be heard. I appeal to all of us to please come together in this sense. I vow my dream, President Trump. Thank you. Oh, say, Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming in the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave, on the shore dimly seen through the mists of the deep, where the foe's hearty host in dread silence reposes. Waters that which the breeze o'er the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses. Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines on the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, roll long may it wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. When the land is illumined with liberty's smile, if a foe from within strikes a blow at her glory, down, down with the traitor who dares to defile the flag of her stars and the page of her glory. By the millions unchained, when a bright right was gained, we will keep our bright blaze and forever unstained, and the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave, while the land of the free is the home of the brave. Oh, the Spirit is, for we free men shall stand between beloved home and the war's desolation, blessed with victory and peace. May the heavens rescue the land. Praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when the cause it is just, and the spirit is our trust in the star-spangled banner, in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the